Beneath Antarctica's frozen surface lies a vast and haunting mystery, a hidden world sealed away in ice for millions of years. But what if that icy veil were to vanish? Today, we're peeling back the cold silence of the southern continent to reveal how melting all of Antarctica's ice would reshape our planet in ways we can hardly imagine. As towering glaciers collapse and oceans swell, coastlines will vanish and entire ecosystems will be thrown into chaos. This is Beyond the Ice, and here's what could unfold if Earth's last great frozen frontier were to melt away. Welcome to Antarctica, a vast, frozen realm that wraps around the South Pole like a silent, icy crown. It's a continent 40% larger than Europe, dominated by ancient glaciers and home to an array of life that defies the odds: seals basking on the ice, whales roaming the frigid waters, penguins waddling in colonies, and scattered outposts of scientists braving the cold in pursuit of discovery. But amidst this majestic expanse lies a colossal mass of ice that demands global attention, an icy behemoth the size of Florida. This is the Thwaites Glacier, ominously nicknamed the Doomsday Glacier. Why the chilling title? Because if this glacier collapses, the consequences would ripple across the planet. Right now, Thwaites is melting at an alarming rate, shedding a staggering 50 billion tons of ice into the ocean every year. It alone is responsible for about 4% of the total sea level rise we've seen so far, roughly 9 inches worldwide. But here's the terrifying part. What was once thought to be a slow process unfolding over centuries might now happen within mere decades. This ticking time bomb of ice is not just a symbol of climate change, it's a warning, carved in ice, crashing into our oceans. But here's the problem: we don't have the luxury of waiting decades, let alone centuries. So let's imagine the unimaginable. What if Thwaites Glacier didn't melt slowly over time, but vanished in a matter of seconds? In the blink of an eye, this colossal glacier collapses, unleashing its frozen mass into the Southern Ocean. From there, meltwater surges outward, flooding into the Indian, Atlantic, and Pacific Oceans. Global sea levels spike by a staggering 60 centimeters, that's about 2 feet, instantly. The streets of San Francisco begin to vanish beneath rising tides. Miami and New Orleans? Submerged, overwhelmed by water rushing in with unstoppable force. But why did this icy titan crumble so suddenly? The answer lies deep beneath the surface. Hidden underneath Thwaites is a massive subglacial river, churning with meltwater. Fed by the very ice it threatens to destroy, this river is powered not by the sun, but by geothermal heat radiating from Earth's molten core. At first, the melting is subtle, invisible. But over time, that warmth turns deadly. Ice weakens. Pressure builds. Then, enormous slabs of the glacier snap and collapse, setting off a domino effect. One block of ice triggers the fall of another and another, until the glacier begins tearing itself apart. And this is just one piece of the puzzle. Because below Antarctica's icy facade lies an entire hidden world, a vast and mysterious network of rivers, lakes, and ancient landscapes that have remained untouched for millions of years. What else could be lurking beneath the frozen surface, waiting to awaken? But before we dive into the mysterious underworld buried beneath the ice, let's take a moment to understand just why Antarctica is so critically important to life on Earth. Antarctica is not just a frozen landmass. It's a colossal fortress of ice, stretching over 14 million square kilometers, 5.4 million square miles. That's about 1.5 times the size of the United States. And it's not just wide, it's deep. The ice averages over 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles, thick, a crushing weight that has pressed down on the land beneath for millions of years. Hidden inside this icy giant is a truly mind-bending figure: 25 million cubic kilometers, 6 million cubic miles of ice. That's 90% of all the ice on the planet. And with it, 60% of the Earth's entire supply of fresh water, frozen in time, locked in silence. Unlike the Arctic, where sea ice floats atop the ocean, Antarctica's ice is anchored to solid ground, an entire continent buried beneath an icy tomb. In fact, 98% of Antarctica's land is covered by this thick, frozen blanket. But it doesn't end there. Beneath this ice sheet lies a hidden ocean world, around 1.5 million square kilometers, 580,000 square miles of submerged seafloor, tucked away in secret darkness. These are ancient oceans trapped under layers of glacial ice, sealed off from sunlight and untouched by the outside world. Now imagine, for a moment, what would happen if all of that ice were to vanish, not over centuries, but in mere minutes. If Antarctica were to melt entirely, the results would be apocalyptic. Sea levels across the globe would rise by an astonishing 70 meters, 230 feet. Entire coastlines would be redrawn. Iconic cities would disappear beneath the waves. Millions, if not billions, of people would be displaced. In a moment, we'll explore just how this unimaginable event would reshape our world. But first, let's go deeper, to the hidden realms beneath the ice, where time stands still and secrets from Earth's deep past may still linger. But before we witness the drowning of coastlines, there's something even more unsettling lurking beneath the ice, and it might pose just as grave a threat to humanity. Beneath Antarctica's frozen crust lies a biological time capsule, harboring ancient microbes and primordial viruses, some of which have been sealed away for tens of thousands, or even millions of years. If the ice melts completely, these long-dormant organisms could be resurrected, re-entering an ecosystem and a human population that has absolutely no natural immunity against them. These ancient pathogens evolved in a world vastly different from ours, and modern immune systems would likely be defenseless in the face of their unfamiliar biology. Without prior evolutionary exposure, even a single rogue virus could trigger uncontrolled outbreaks, leaping through populations before we even knew what we were facing. Standard treatments might prove ineffective, forcing scientists to scramble for solutions using cutting-edge gene therapies, high-potency antibiotics, or precision-targeted antivirals, many of which are still experimental. In some cases, these infections could resist everything in our medical arsenal, requiring prolonged treatment regimens, high-dosage medications, and even controlled-release drug technologies just to keep symptoms in check. In the worst-case scenario, a newly released pathogen could spark a health crisis on a global scale, one we may not be fully prepared for. As the ice melts, we're not just unlocking water, we're opening a frozen vault of forgotten biology, and no one knows exactly what's waiting inside. Fortunately, we're not heading into this unknown future empty-handed. Advances in biotechnology are already arming us with tools to meet these emerging threats head-on. One standout example is You Gelteq, a biotech company that's redefining how medicine and nutrition are delivered, using a revolutionary gel-based system for administering drugs and nutrients. Unlike traditional tablets or capsules, You Gelteq's patented gel technology allows for higher dosages and precision-controlled release, making it especially effective for tackling complex infections that require sustained, targeted treatment. This innovation could prove vital in combating ancient pathogens released from melting ice, organisms that might demand a whole new approach to medication. But You Gelteq's impact goes far beyond extreme medical emergencies. It's addressing a surprisingly common struggle shared by nearly 1 billion people worldwide, the difficulty of swallowing pills. Instead of choking down a hard tablet, imagine taking your medication in a smooth, easy-to-swallow gel, safe, effective, and even pleasant to consume. That's a total game changer. And the innovation doesn't stop there. You Gelteq's platform is versatile and scalable, already being applied across human and animal health sectors, from pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals to pet wellness and athletic performance. Currently, the company is making strides in the nutraceutical market with a robust portfolio of over 70 functional products. At the same time, it's actively working toward FDA approval for its groundbreaking drug delivery platform. Now trading publicly on the Nasdaq under the ticker GELS, You Gelteq is partnering with top brands to embed its gel technology into new and existing formulations, poised to disrupt a global drug and nutrient delivery industry valued at nearly $500 billion. To learn more about You Gelteq's impressive growth potential, check out the link in the description. But keep watching, because later in this video, you'll see that while this technology is a critical step forward, it may take much more than innovation alone to defend humanity from what lies beneath Antarctica's ancient ice. Let's dive into one of the strangest hidden worlds on Earth, an alien-like realm locked beneath Antarctica's frozen shell. As we pierce through the ancient ice, a surreal landscape unfolds, a silent, pitch-black ocean stretching out in every direction, lit only by the occasional shimmer of bioluminescence. Above us, the ice ceiling glows faintly, revealing an astonishing discovery: life. Clinging upside down to the base of the ice sheet, you'll spot delicate, ghostly forms, Antarctic anemones. But these aren't your typical sea anemones rooted like underwater flowers. These ones move. Yes, in a bizarre twist of evolution, these icy invertebrates gently writhe and drift, like tiny jellyfish trying to navigate an upside-down ceiling. Scientists still don't know where they're headed or why. Surrounding them are other strange survivors: translucent fish, pale crustaceans, and slow-moving creatures that seem more at home in a science fiction novel than on our planet. And the obvious question arises: how do they survive here, in this desolate, frigid abyss? The answer is unsettling. These organisms feed on a snowstorm of microscopic detritus drifting down from the surface, bits of plankton, waste particles, and organic remnants carried by distant currents. But even more disturbing is their hidden feast: decaying remains of prehistoric life, rotting skeletons, fossilized bacterial colonies, and ancient organic matter left behind when Antarctica was a green, thriving landscape millions of years ago. It's like an underwater pantry stocked with the expired groceries of Earth's deep past. In these icy depths, nothing is wasted, and everything, no matter how ancient, becomes part of the circle of survival. But don't get too comfortable. A low, thunderous crack rolls across the water like a growl from the Earth itself. Another towering glacier is breaking loose. Giant ice masses, some the size of cities, are about to crash into the sea, sending shockwaves through the ecosystem and flooding coastlines thousands of kilometers away. This is Antarctica's awakening, and it's only just begun. As the colossal glaciers flanking Thwaites disintegrate, one after another, torrents of meltwater surge into the global oceans. The planet responds in waves. Sea levels jump another staggering 2.5 meters, 8 feet. The rising tides are relentless, swallowing coastlines and turning urban centers into modern-day Atlantis replicas. On the U.S. East Coast, chaos unfolds. Boston streets become canals. New York's iconic skyline reflects in floodwaters where roads once stood. Miami, already teetering on the edge, disappears beneath the sea. Entire neighborhoods vanish. Millions are displaced, and the infrastructure that once held economies together begins to unravel. But then, something strange happens, a paradox right off the coast of Antarctica. While much of the world drowns, sea levels near Antarctica fall. Yes, fall. It sounds impossible, but there's a scientific twist behind this bizarre behavior. The Antarctic ice sheet, weighing in at an incomprehensible 24 billion megatons, acts like a massive gravitational anchor. It literally pulls ocean water toward itself, elevating sea levels in its vicinity. But as that ice vanishes, so does its gravitational pull, causing local seas to recede, even while waters rise catastrophically elsewhere. Meanwhile, on the eastern front of Antarctica, the mighty Denmark and Scott glaciers collapse. The oceans gain yet another 1.5 meters, 5 feet of depth. Global sea level rise now reaches 4 meters, 15 feet, and the world as we know it continues to disappear. In the United States, national treasures are lost. The Jefferson Memorial, once perched above calm waters, now lies submerged. Fenway Park becomes an underwater relic. Landmarks that define generations are erased, preserved only in memory and photographs. But this is not just America's loss. Across the globe, cities that once bustled with life now struggle to stay afloat. Shanghai sinks under the weight of the water. Lagos becomes a network of flooded roads and rooftops. Mumbai's rail stations are overwhelmed. Jakarta, already sinking, now surrenders completely. Global ports, lifelines of trade, are destroyed, leaving ships stranded and economies paralyzed. This isn't just a crisis. It's a planetary reshaping, and we're watching it unfold in real time. All that rising seawater doesn't just stop at the coasts, it begins invading the heartlands. Saltwater surges inland, seeping into once fertile farmlands and rendering them barren. Crops wither. Food systems collapse. Generations of agricultural prosperity are washed away in a brine-soaked tide. But the damage doesn't stop on the surface. Beneath our feet, a quieter catastrophe unfolds. Underground aquifers, those ancient, precious reservoirs that supply drinking water to billions, are now tainted. Saltwater infiltrates the porous rock layers, corrupting the fresh water with saline intrusions. Wells go dry, or worse, turn toxic. Entire regions begin to face a new kind of thirst, one that can't be quenched by technology alone. And yet, the danger cuts even deeper than salt. As Antarctica melts, it doesn't just release water. It unleashes forgotten life, bacteria, and microbial organisms that have been locked away for millennia. Frozen in ice since before the dawn of civilization, these ancient microbes have been preserved in a time capsule of sub-zero silence. Now, exposed to the modern world, they carry genetic traits humanity has never encountered, some potentially resistant to antibiotics, others with the ability to disrupt delicate ecological balances. The invisible threat is now flowing silently through water systems and soil, awakening from the past to challenge our present. And this is only the beginning. Some of these ancient bacteria aren't just passive remnants of a bygone era. They're alive, and some of them are dangerous. Scientists have linked certain strains to infections associated with serious conditions like cystic fibrosis, a disease already difficult to manage in the modern world. But that's just the beginning of the threat. These microbes carry a terrifying secret weapon. They're naturally resistant to antibiotics, the very drugs we depend on to fight infections. And what's worse, they have the ability to share that resistance. Through a genetic process called horizontal gene transfer, they can pass their resistance traits to the everyday bacteria we already live with. If that happens, we're looking at the birth of a post-antibiotic world, a future where even minor infections could become fatal. In that scenario, a scraped knee or a routine surgery could become a death sentence. Contaminated water wouldn't just make us sick, it could make us vulnerable to untreatable infections. The rise of superbugs wouldn't be a dystopian concept anymore. It would be our terrifying new normal. But like every complex villain in a great story, these bacteria may also have a hidden gift. Some of these hardy microbes possess traits that could revolutionize medicine. Their resilience might hold the blueprint for developing next-generation antibiotics, capable of defeating the very threats they pose. Others have shown promise in bioremediation, breaking down toxic waste and cleaning polluted environments where nothing else can survive. Incredibly, some of them could even offer a path toward biodegradable plastics, helping us tackle one of the planet's most persistent pollutants. So while they carry the potential to threaten life as we know it, they may also hold the keys to healing a sick world, if only we're wise and fast enough to harness their power. As colossal slabs of ice continue to disintegrate and dissolve into the sea, the ripple effects are being felt across the entire planetary ecosystem. One of the most profound disruptions is taking place beneath the surface, where the very rhythm of the ocean is starting to falter. Before this surge of glacial meltwater, Earth's oceans moved with a majestic precision. Dense, salty water, cooled by polar winds, would sink to the ocean floor, pushing warmer, lighter water to the surface. This circulation created a vast global conveyor belt, a hidden engine that transported heat, oxygen, and life-sustaining nutrients across the seas. It was this flow that allowed tropical warmth to reach the poles and deep-sea nutrients to nourish the sunlit shallows. It kept marine ecosystems in balance. But now, that mechanism is starting to jam. The relentless infusion of fresh water from melting glaciers is diluting the salinity of surface waters. With less salt, the water becomes less dense and resists sinking. This simple shift is throwing the entire conveyor belt out of sync. It's as if a vital artery of the Earth's climate system has become clogged, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Oceanographers warn that this disruption is already interfering with the powerful Gulf Stream, which helps moderate temperatures in Europe and North America. If similar disruptions ripple from Antarctica into the Atlantic, some climate models suggest it could even trigger a sudden plunge into an ice age, with drastic cooling in some regions. Alternatively, if the Antarctic melt continues to primarily fuel sea level rise, we may be facing a far different future, one of runaway global warming, where rising seas amplify storms, flood coastlines, and bake inland regions under shifting climate zones. But it's not just the planet's thermostat that's in danger. It's the ocean's food supply. The conveyor belt doesn't only move heat. It also stirs life. When deep waters rise, they carry with them a treasure trove of nutrients, phosphates, nitrates, and minerals needed for the growth of phytoplankton, the microscopic algae that form the foundation of the ocean's food chain. These tiny organisms feed fish, whales, and everything in between. Disrupt their growth, and the entire web of marine life begins to unravel. Ironically, though, the waters around Antarctica might temporarily burst into life. As ancient ice melts, it releases long-trapped nutrients, especially iron, into the Southern Ocean. This could trigger a sudden algal bloom, painting the seas green and feeding a boom in local marine life. But these blooms may be short-lived, chaotic, and unpredictable, like flashes of fire before a long winter. The question remains, will our oceans find a new balance, or is this just the beginning of a deeper unraveling? The unexpected surge in phytoplankton might seem like a silver lining in the midst of all this chaos. After all, these microscopic algae are natural carbon vacuums, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during photosynthesis. And with the planet heating up rapidly, we're going to need every molecule of CO2 removed that we can get. Why is the heat intensifying so dramatically? It all starts with the loss of Earth's natural air conditioning, ice. Antarctica's brilliant white surface isn't just cold and beautiful, it's one of the most reflective surfaces on the planet. Like a massive cosmic mirror, it bounces a huge amount of incoming sunlight back into space. But when that ice vanishes, it's replaced by dark, heat-absorbing ocean water. Instead of being reflected, sunlight is now absorbed, and the planet warms even faster. It's a vicious feedback loop. And there's more. As the oceans warm, microscopic fungi, the unseen decomposers of the deep, spring into hyperdrive. These tiny organisms feast on organic matter, just like how fungi break down fallen leaves in a forest. In the sea, they decompose marine snow, dead algae, and ancient organic material that's been buried under ice for millennia. And in doing so, they release more carbon dioxide into the water and into the atmosphere. But the melting ice also has a hidden consequence. It lays down a thin, freshwater layer on top of the salty ocean. This disrupts the natural gas exchange between the sea and the sky. Normally, oceans act as a vast carbon sink, absorbing CO2 from the air. But the freshwater lid acts like plastic wrap, trapping more carbon in the atmosphere, accelerating the warming cycle even further. And just when we thought it couldn't get worse, the final curtain begins to fall. The last strongholds of the Antarctic ice sheet, massive, ancient glaciers once thought to be stable for centuries, begin to shatter and slip into the sea. Towering walls of ice collapse like dominoes, sending tsunamis of fresh water surging into the ocean basins. The scale of the melt is staggering. Sea levels surge by meters. Coastal cities disappear beneath the waves. Inland regions burn beneath intensified heat waves. And then, as the ice retreats for the final time, something long buried, long forgotten, begins to emerge from the ancient depths. What lies beneath might hold secrets to Earth's past or warnings for its future. Beneath Antarctica's icy armor lies a staggering natural marvel, one hidden from human eyes for millions of years. As the final ice vanishes, Earth reveals a canyon system so vast, it dwarfs even the Grand Canyon. Stretching more than 100 kilometers, 62 miles, longer and plunging an astonishing 3.5 kilometers, 2 miles, below sea level, it's the deepest canyon ever discovered on Earth, carving a path from Antarctica's frigid interior all the way to the sea. And that's not all. Nestled within this once frozen wilderness is Lake Vostok, a colossal body of water that has been sealed beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice for the past 15 million years. In terms of volume, it ranks as the 6th largest lake on the planet, an ancient, isolated world unto itself. Now fully exposed, its shimmering surface invites curiosity and awe. Theoretically, you could even spread out a blanket and enjoy a surreal lakeside picnic. That is, if you're still in the mood to picnic amid a global cataclysm, and if you dare come anywhere near the microscopic survivors of Lake Vostok. These ancient microorganisms have evolved in complete isolation, untouched by the outside world for millennia. Their biology could be radically different, and no one knows what they might do inside a human body. But there's no time to marvel at this newly unveiled landscape. Something far more pressing is happening. The final collapse is here. As the last remaining glaciers dissolve into the warming oceans, sea levels explode upward, reaching their peak, over 70 meters, 230 feet, above what we once knew. Cities once bustling with life now sit at the bottom of the sea. Iconic skylines have disappeared beneath the waves. And the human toll? Catastrophic. 40% of the global population, more than 3 billion people, live in coastal regions. Entire nations vanish. Infrastructure is swept away. Displacement on a scale never seen before unfolds in real time. This is no longer just a climate crisis. This is a planetary reset, an irreversible transformation of the Earth as we knew it. And just like that, in mere minutes, billions of lives are upended as Antarctica's frozen heart collapses into the sea. A once unthinkable event has become reality. The Atlantic seaboard is no more. Entire swaths of the eastern United States lie drowned beneath a rising, unstoppable ocean. Cities are erased. Neighborhoods vanish. The skyline of New York? Gone. Washington, D.C.? Underwater. The deluge is so sudden and violent that even skyscrapers, 23 stories tall, become lifeboats for those fortunate or fast enough to make it to the rooftops. In California, the land fractures into a scattered archipelago, a chaotic patchwork of islands poking through the water where cities once stood. And in some places, the land has disappeared entirely, swallowed by the sea without a trace. Across the Atlantic, London, Paris, Venice, cities rich in culture, history, and life, now rest at the bottom of the ocean, monuments to a world lost in a geological instant. The human toll is staggering. Millions displaced. Millions more injured or lost. Panic ripples across the globe as governments scramble to mount a response. But how do you respond to the drowning of the world? Those who had the foresight or sheer luck to escape early, speeding inland as seawater devoured coastal streets, may have survived. But they're the exception. The majority? Swept away before realizing what was happening. Emergency services are in chaos. Military units attempt to deploy search and rescue, but the scale of the disaster overwhelms them. Helicopters strain to reach desperate survivors clinging to the tops of buildings, but there simply aren't enough. Boats are launched, but supply is limited and time is short. And even if rescue comes, then what? Infrastructure is destroyed. Power grids are gone. Hospitals drowned. Roads erased. Entire supply chains disrupted. There are no easy answers. But perhaps the most pressing danger now looms in silence, the collapse of freshwater systems. Aquifers are inundated with saltwater. Desalination plants, where they exist, are insufficient. Clean drinking water, one of humanity's most basic needs, is suddenly scarce. This isn't just a disaster. It's an extinction-level reset of civilization as we know it. And it all began with the slow, silent drip of melting ice. With Earth's freshwater reservoirs now contaminated by seawater intrusion, humanity faces an unprecedented crisis, a widespread shortage of clean, drinkable water. What was once abundant is now a scarce and precious resource. Coastal cities, once beacons of prosperity, are either underwater or uninhabitable. The new gold is not oil or land, but freshwater. Suddenly, the heartland becomes the homeland. Inland regions that were previously overlooked, like the U.S. Midwest, transform into bustling zones of refuge and opportunity. Cities like Denver, Minneapolis, and even Las Vegas, once considered peripheral or too dry, now emerge as the new centers of civilization. The irony isn't lost on anyone. The same inland dwellers who once felt excluded from the coastal elite are now hosting the displaced, holding what everyone desperately needs: higher ground and access to untouched aquifers. Meanwhile, in the global south, the catastrophe hits with brutal intensity. Entire nations vanish beneath the rising tides. Bangladesh, home to over 160 million souls, is completely submerged, its vibrant culture and communities swallowed by the ocean. The devastation triggers a historic wave of climate refugees, numbering in the hundreds of millions. Geopolitical fault lines deepen. Nations turn inward, protecting what little they have. Desperation fuels unrest as countries plead for aid, but the sheer scale of global collapse makes coordinated relief nearly impossible. Rich nations are overwhelmed. Poorer ones are left to fend for themselves. International coalitions strain and fracture under the pressure. What once seemed like a distant warning from climate scientists has now become a global reckoning. And this is just the beginning. Now that the last vestiges of Antarctic ice have vanished into the seas, the Earth faces its next ticking time bomb, the permafrost. This ancient, frozen soil has remained locked beneath the polar regions for over 40,000 years. But now, with rising temperatures, it begins to thaw. Slowly at first, then rapidly. As it melts, it belches out massive quantities of carbon dioxide and methane, gases that have been sealed away for millennia. This release sends global temperatures soaring even higher, setting off a runaway warming cycle that feeds on itself. The more it melts, the more gas it releases. The more gas it releases, the hotter the planet becomes. Picture it like throwing a frozen dinner into a microwave set to apocalypse. Dormant microorganisms, long buried and preserved, awaken. They begin devouring the newly thawed organic material with insatiable hunger, releasing potent greenhouse gases in the process. Each microscopic burp from these ancient microbes injects methane and CO2 into the atmosphere, turning the skies into a slow-cooking oven. Yes, you read that right. We're breathing in ancient microbe farts. And with every exhale of theirs, the Earth bakes a little more. But as ridiculous as that sounds, things are only getting more terrifying. As the ground softens, long-dormant DNA viruses may be reanimated, emerging from their icy prisons to wreak havoc on a population already scrambling for survival. With global infrastructure in chaos, creating and distributing vaccines against these ancient threats would be a nearly impossible challenge. Entire health systems, already burdened by flooding, displacement, and economic collapse, would buckle under the pressure. Meanwhile, global average temperatures rise by another 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, 9 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Crops fail. Water supplies vanish. Cities are suffocating in the heat. What was once considered catastrophic is now the new normal. And the Earth, once a blue marble teeming with life, begins to resemble something else entirely, a planet at war with its own past. With the global average temperature now pushing a sweltering 27 degrees Celsius 80 degrees Fahrenheit, humanity is on the move. The Great Migration has begun. The new promised lands? Canada, Alaska, and the freshly unveiled territories of the Arctic and Antarctic, regions once frozen in time, now thawing into bizarre, habitable frontiers. What was once considered inhospitable is now prime real estate. Coastal cities lie in ruins beneath the waves, and billions flee inland or toward the poles in search of safety, clean water, and breathable air. In this strange new world, Antarctica begins to resemble its prehistoric past. 34 million years ago, it was a lush, temperate rainforest, teeming with life not unlike present-day New Zealand. Now, with heat and sunlight returning, it's no longer a land of eternal ice. Palm trees rise along newly formed beaches, and the South Ocean warms to welcome creatures like alligators, who slink through its tropical currents like ghosts from Earth's ancient epics. It sounds almost beautiful, but only if you forget everything it took to get here. Because let's not forget, Antarctica didn't actually melt in mere minutes. That was only a thought experiment, a terrifying simulation. In reality, if such a collapse did happen, it would mean entire coastal civilizations reduced to watery graves. Over 3 billion lives lost. Freshwater supplies contaminated. A chain reaction of global warming spiraling beyond our control. And the looming threat of prehistoric pandemics. It's almost impossible to imagine a worse global catastrophe. Almost. Because just maybe, there's something even more surreal waiting in another timeline. What if land and water switched places? Oceans where deserts once stood. Forests where sea once ruled. But that's a tale for another time. A story for another alternate reality.